Unitarianism. Unitarianism is unique in that it offers an unbiased vantage point addressing questions and controversies of the world with the wisdom of a broad faith foundation. Or at least it's about as close as a church can come to this kind of utopian notion of non-judgmental observation. Here today we likely have a Hindu or two, a crux of Christians, maybe a Muslim, a few Jews. Add to that an atheist, an agnostic, a skeptic, interspersed amongst a metaphysician, a spiritual, not religious seeker in every row, and you have this uniquely Unitarian fellowship. A progressive people, free of prejudice, at least publicly, who don't compare or compete with one another, but commune. Quite literally, we have lunch after the service. And at least that's what we strive for. But we're human. Nevertheless, with such a diverse representation of wisdom, passion, and personality, coming from an equally diverse range of faith traditions, I couldn't help but to ponder upon Reverend Russ's choice of topics, a topic relevant to all but truly understood or acted upon by few. Which faith tradition is the most generous or authentic in their generosity? It's a question I can only ask in a Unitarian church, and a question I didn't have the answer for. However, a homeless man in San Francisco thinks he did. Sitting on a street corner, this man placed 9 begging bowls before him. Atop of each, he taped a small label bearing the words Muslim, atheist, Jewish, Buddhist, spiritual, agnostic, pagan, Hindu, or Christian. He didn't write Unitarian on there, so I don't have to worry about offending you guys. He then scribbled the question, which religion cares most about the homeless? Across the cardboard sign, and then sat and observed the results. After an evening of silently sitting on the sidewalk, it turns out the atheist bowl was more than double the donations of any other.
Probably true.
Yeah. You know, there's something truly refreshing about an altruistic atheist. You see, while giving boosts the Buddhists' class in their next life, counts towards the Christians' 10%, and makes good of the Muslim tax and tithing obligations, the blessed atheist lives and gives in the present, almsgiving unattached to the afterlife. Opposed to their faithful counterparts' rapture or reincarnation-rooted reciprocity, they demonstrate a generosity driven by compassion rather than karma. With this atheistic authenticity in mind and a recognition that each individual is unique, despite our homeless brother's hypothesis, I dive in with the broader topic of reciprocity versus generosity via a little thing we refer to as intention. Reverend Russ wrote, reciprocity means giving with the expectation of a return. Generosity means giving with no conditions of expectations of a return. However, I feel that we're once again dancing between reality and utopia. Ideally, we give completely freely. But as imperfect anthropods, we always expect something in return. Not bad. In fact, it can be because we bear so much love for those to whom we give that we crave recognition. My mom's here today. Yeah. I remember spending all that time as a little kid in art class making those macaroni kind of Mother's Day cards. Did you guys do that? Yeah, and then going around and picking all my neighbors' flowers when the sun went down to make a bouquet. In hopes of making my mommy smile. And ideally, for as long as those flowers didn't die on the countertop, easing any potential punishments for not so generous acts that would proceed throughout the week. The feeling that we have when we make another smile is the best gift we could ever receive. And it indeed underlies the original act. John Bunyan spoke of this when he wrote, "You have not awakened to the day until you have done something for someone who can never repay you." I didn't expect my mother to give anything quantifiable in return, but what if she simply took the macaroni card and brushed the pasta penciled "I love you" into a pot of steaming water for supper without acknowledging my generosity? Ouch, even worse, what if she didn't share what she had cooked? We give expecting a return, but is that really a bad thing? Or do we really have a choice? Jacques Derrida wrote in this, as soon as something is recognized as a gift, he stated, the receiver becomes indebted and obliged to offer a return. That can be as simple as an acknowledgement, but regardless, what was a free or generous gift collapses then into an economic exchange. Generosity falls to reciprocity. Thus, a gift, he states, can only exist as long as it remains unrecognized by both giver and receiver. From the Christian perspective, the proverbial words of Matthew 6 bear relevancy. When you give to the needy, do not sound a trumpet. This is actually a literal occurrence in the Persian kind of like time period, in that the poor would sit there with a trumpet, and when somebody would come by and give, they would blow it to attract attention. No, the text continues, do not sound as the hypocrites in the synagogues and on the streets to be praised by others. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. And your Creator, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. This is a pretty well-known proverbial reflection in and outside the Christian context. However, a more modern predecessor of Matthew, one named Maya Angelou, adds a new vantage point to this perspective. As you grow older, she says, you will discover that you have two hands. One for helping yourself, the other for helping others. Now, as an aspiring yogi, two things struck me in this reading. In Sanskrit, the word Maya means the false illusion of independence. We are interdependent, not dependent, that's restrictive. Our interdependence is empowering. Second, building off that point, if there is such a thing as oneness, can there be such a thing as selfishness? So whereas many read Matthew's words as a call to give in secret, Maya Angelou and the Hindu tradition see it as a call to be generous to the larger whole, self and social. The word used in that passage is almsgiving. It's one of three spiritual tenets in the Christian faith: almsgiving, fasting, and prayer, and one present in the corpus of religious faith traditions. In the Quran, it says, if you give alms openly, it is well. If you do it in secret to the poor, it is better. And in Buddhism, alms or almsgiving is the respect given by a lay Buddhist monk, nun, or spiritually developed person to another being. Total willingness to give is the wish-granting gem for fulfilling the hopes of wandering beings, they say. This Buddhist perspective is essential. So many times, despite our best intentions, giving can actually enhance the division, as Derrida's statement declared. Dropping change in a hat or serving soup over a barrier of a cafeteria table to a homeless, nameless neighbor can enhance the socioeconomic divide. But the Buddhist perspective on almsgiving is different. It is a gift of empowerment and requires the humility of the giver. Activist Lily Watson spoke of this when she declared, if you have come here to give pity, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. Reciprocity in this sense is the recognition that the other, the recipient, has equal value to the giver. Yes, Maya Angelou, we have two hands, and they need not watch each other give, but work in unison. And whether we label that as reciprocity and or generosity is insignificant as long as our intention remains in empowering, healing, and evolving alongside one another. So I had a good idea of how I was going to close this out today. And then I read the reading that came along with the topic of the day. I read it right around the time of the Gilroy shooting on my radio. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. In the Christian faith, we say, love others as you love yourself. Either way you look at it, it starts with being generous with ourselves. Loving ourselves, taking care of ourselves, seeing ourselves in others and vice versa. Compassion is sharing a common identity, a common passion with the other. You see, when we don't love ourselves first, when we don't give to ourselves, we're left empty, and what we end up giving outwardly can be hate or fear. You know what I got when I started typing reciprocity in my Google search bar? Gun laws. Try it. Really interesting. Throughout the past 20 years, statistics show that well over half of mass shootings include the shooters taking their own life. This is a horrible way to read, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. However, it is evidence that we must place equal evidence inward, emphasis inward, in regards to often outward concepts of love, generosity, and grace. That's not always simple. Self-love can be difficult. We often see ourselves as less deserving than the other. Grace may be free, but it is not cheap. It is not easy. It requires us to ditch any preconceptions of generosity and reciprocity and see ourselves as equally entwined with the larger whole. And it requires humility and faith. Faith that we have love abundant enough to give, and humility in knowing that love and grace do not originate with us. So I leave you with a final image today. I return to my youthful days of borrowing my neighbor's flowers for Mother's Day bouquets. Medieval mystic Teresa of Avila was known for her reflections on grace as well as her green thumb. A guru in the garden, Teresa was of humble roots. Get it? And insisted that though grace was a seed that she could not herself create nor plant, it was her call and delight to cultivate it. You see, authentic generosity occurs when we allow ourselves to fall fully into the simple bliss of nurturing seeds of grace and compassion into flowers and fruits of which to generously and communally celebrate and share. Shalom, my friends.